suffered the most wicked fate on the cruelest creation of men. Yet on that beautiful, terrible cross, you did what only you could, turning that dark, inspired evil of hell into our soul's greatest good. We see the love that you showed us. We see the life that you lost. We bow and wonder and praise you for the beautiful, terrible cross. There on that beautiful, terrible cross, the darkness was strong on that hill. Lord, you remain sovereign, still in control, as your perfect plan was fulfilled. We see the love that you showed us. We see the life that you lost. We bow and wonder and praise you for the beautiful, terrible cross. Oh, we gain the riches of heaven. Jesus, you paid the horrible cost. We stand forgiven and praise you for the beautiful, terrible cross. For the beautiful, terrible cross.
Mercy's Well. Beautiful, terrible cross.
I've seen the heartache that this world can bring, but oh, with my heart I've learned to sing. I know that God, my rock, is steady, and He's always there. So I'll stand on Him, though troubles may come. In all of life's storms, I know He's enough. There's no greater peace in all of the earth than when you're standing firm. I'm standing firm on the rock, His promise of grace. There's no sign of fear, no doubt or dismay. I'll stand on His goodness, His mercy and love. Thank Jesus, I'm standing firm. So this world can try to steal my joy, but deep in my heart I know there's so much more. For I've read the promise in His precious word, and I know they're true. So Satan can try, but he'll always fail. When he knocks me down, I'll stand up again. For I'm standing on Jesus, and He always wins, and I'm standing firm. And I'm standing firm on the rock, His promise of grace. There's no sign of fear, no doubt or dismay. I'll stand on His goodness, His mercy and love. Thank Jesus, I'm standing firm. And I'm standing firm on the rock, His promise of grace. There's no sign of fear, no doubt or dismay. I'll stand on
The Bible Tones, Standing Firm.
We'll be shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. At the last trumpet sound, these bodies will be changed. No death can hold us down in a cold, lonesome grave. We'll be shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. Jesus will come down. He'll give a mighty shout. Shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. At the last trumpet sound, these bodies will be changed. No death can hold us down in a cold, lonesome grave. We'll be shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. Some will scoff and say that Jesus won't come back. They will be surprised when all the saints arise. What a day when we see Christ. Yes, there's gonna be a meeting in the clouds. And then we're gonna meet him if we know him when we hear him shout. We'll be shouting, shout that happy rapture day. Trumpet sound, these bodies will be changed. No death can hold us down in a cold, lonesome grave. We'll be shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. We'll be shouting in the clouds. We'll see Jesus. We'll be shouting in the clouds. Meet our loved ones. We'll be shouting in the clouds on that happy rapture day. Shouting in the clouds.
Sweetwater Revival, Shouting in the Clouds.
You're listening to Affirm Southern Gospel Radio.
Introducing Wendy's new Saucy Nugs. The nugs you love, covered in your favorite sauces. So no matter what flavor you're craving, Wendy's has you covered. Grab Wendy's new Saucy Nugs today. Open till midnight or later.
At participating U.S. Wendy's. Hours may vary by location.
We're kicking off summer's greatest hits at Macy's. And we're celebrating with our lowest prices of the summer. Take 40 to 60% off everything you need to make the most of beach days, backyard barbecues, and summer weddings. Because Macy's has you covered for the big days and all the little moments that make up summer's greatest hits. Shop our lowest prices of the summer today at Macy's. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
Need parts fast? O'Reilly Auto Parts has fast. Need them now? We've got now. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. We're O'Reilly Fast. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Were you uninvited to game night? Do you play board games with the ferocious intensity of an iron-fisted oligarch? Have friends left game night asking, how do you sleep at night? Then you should get a mattress from Mattress Firm. They can help anyone sleep.
Good morning. Nice turnout. Glad to see everybody here. It's a beautiful morning this morning. For those of you that are discouraged, you thought it was Mark's turn. You got me instead. Mark is on vacation, and I'm filling in for him today. But glad to be here. Glad to be able to do it. Anybody have a spoken prayer request in the sanctuary? Okay, Steve. Ruby? Okay.
Remember Israel in prayer. Remember Ukraine and Russia.
Okay. Yes, sis. Okay. Any others? Scott?
I don't know if y'all remember that gentleman, Chris, I brought that one day.
Mm-hmm.
He was about 2 months ago, I guess. Something happened to him. He pretty much rode off, and he ended up spending a month and a half in the hospital. And I spent some time with him yesterday at my house, just getting him away from his house and getting him out of the house and stuff. And having him around good people. So, just pray that the Lord continues to work in his life and just reveal himself to him, and pray that he gets set free of the Lord.
Any others?
Tim, we always desire your prayers to heaven and say, go on, young people.
Brother?
Tim, you remember me and my family, me and my two brothers, Lee Hicks, Brother Julie Plumley, and I special.
Yes, sister.
Our neighbor the other day had, they're not sure if he had a stroke or a heart attack, and he's in the hospital. And also I found out today that one of my cousins had a stroke, and she needs prayer.
Is he? He's there? Okay. Okay. Any others? Let's just pray for a good day in the Lord. Just pray for, things that our assembly here today and our just a second, Bruce, that we just ask for his guidance and just pray his will is done. Let's come in here today with open hearts and open minds and just take it in what he has for us today and leave the problems, the world outside those doors just for a few hours. Can we do that and just be opened up? Bruce, what do you have?
I would make one more prayer request, and it's for me. Charlie told me last Saturday I got a doctor appointment coming up this coming Wednesday with Dr. Payne, and that's my urologist. Just prayed I get a good report from her.
Okay. I'll ask you to stand then. Mason, if you lead us out, sir. Thank you. Your blessings on all the services here today. It's so blessed. So when we think about what we've covered in Mark, we've seen Jesus' ministry. We've seen his teaching of the disciples. We've seen the conflicts, many of them, with the scribes and the Pharisees. Chapter 13 that we're in today, and we're going to be just looking at parts of it. There's so much here. We don't cover all of the chapter, but when we think about this verse, we think, and what is going on so far in our lessons of this in Mark, we think about the last couple lessons, for example. Remember, they were trying to trick Jesus. His haters were plotting against him. They questioned his authority. They tried to trap him in heresy against the government. They tried to sway public opinion away from him and against him. Remember last week the question about should we pay taxes, should we pay Caesar? He effectively silenced all of his critics. Well, this chapter, we see a transition occur. We're going to move away from the events of the time and those controversies to a look into the future. That's what chapter 13 is about. The title of our lesson says The Climax of History. When we think about what's going to happen when he comes back, that is the climax of humanity. That's the climax of history. Everything's going to change, and he touches on that. Jesus will prophesy in today's lesson about future events. So whenever you think about that, and we're going to look at him. He's going to prophesy some key events. Some are going to be in the near future. They'll actually play out within a generation of him speaking it. And then there's going to be some that we have yet to see, and we're going to see. So we're going to talk about that. So I thought this is a little different than what we've had in Mark altogether. I call it a transition chapter. It's a bridge, if you will, from the current here and now, Jesus' ministry, his conflicts with the Pharisees, his teaching with the disciples. That's all we've covered. It's always, now today we see this is a bridge to the future is what today's chapter is about. If you notice, our text starts at verse 2 of Mark 13. So in the skip verse, I'm just going to touch on it. Jesus is leaving the temple. This will be the final time he's leaving the temple before his crucifixion with his disciples. And while they're leaving, one of the disciples makes a comment regarding these temple stones. The temple was made out of these huge marble stones. It was a sight to behold. So we've got to looking into some of the stats, if you will, of the temple. This, by the way, was their third temple. This was what was called Herod's temple. And it was massive. They said it took up 1/6 of the town, of the city of Jerusalem. That's how big this complex was. It was white marble, trimmed with gold appointments, trimmed in gold. And some of the base stones were 12 by 12 by 40. Now, that's a big rock. That's that's marble, by the way. Now, imagine this, solid white marble. On a sunny day, it's been recorded that against the white marble and the gold trim, on a sunny day, you couldn't even hardly look at it. It was so bright. So, it's quite impressive. And so one of the disciples in our skip verse 1 makes a comment about these great stones. So in response to that comment is where we pick up our text. And let's read it, Mark 13. And one of the disciples, I said earlier, just makes a comment about the stones. And Jesus answering said to him, "Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." You guys read after me, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of you. I shouldn't have to tell you this at that point, but please read after me. Go ahead, read verse 2. Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign when these things shall be fulfilled?
And Jesus answered them, Take heed, lest this man deceive you.
For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many.
And when ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, be ye not troubled, for such things must needs be, but the end shall not be yet.
But take heed to yourselves, for they shall deliver you up to councils, and in the synagogues ye shall be beaten, and ye shall be brought before rulers and kings for my sake, for testimony against them.
But when ye shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand. Then let the Judea flee to the mountains.
But in those days after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light.
And the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers under heaven shall be shaken.
And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory.
And then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost part of the earth to the uttermost part of heaven.
But of that day and that hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father.
Take heed, watch and pray, ye know not when the time is.
Thank you. Sorry about getting you off on the wrong track at the beginning here. I got a little ahead of myself. Verse 2, Jesus is making a comment back to the disciple that mentions these stones. And remember I said that this chapter is a transition chapter, a bridge from current events to the future. And here Jesus starts to make that point. And here he begins that prophecy about the destruction of the temple, is what he's talking about here. And history shows that in 70 AD it happened. 40 years after Jesus just makes mention of it here, it actually does happen. As great as this temple may appear on this day, it will be dismantled completely, is what Jesus is telling them. And that did happen. We know that. Does anyone know why the stones were taken apart? Why it was dismantled piece by piece? Jesus said that would happen, but there's a story as to why it happened. Remember I told you it was trimmed in gold? Well, they set it on fire, and when the gold melted, it went into the cracks of the rocks, and the Roman soldiers took the stones apart to get the gold out of it. So just as Jesus said 40 years earlier, no stone will be left on another stone. It would be completely dismantled. So it played out. It happened just exactly as he said it would. Verse 3, he sat upon a Mount of Olives over against the temple. See now, remember he was traveling to Bethany. That's where he was staying. So as he would leave Jerusalem during the day, he'd have to make this short trek over to Bethany, and you had to cross the Mount of Olives to get to Bethany. So that's what he's doing. He's going back over to where he's going to spend the night. But his disciples, he's headed that way, but his disciples stop him. And here they are, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, ask him privately. They've been thinking about this. Think about it. This majestic temple. And we can also sometimes, structures can become idols too, can't they? They just thought there was nothing, the temple, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having nice temples, but can we sometimes put too much emphasis on the temple instead of what really goes on inside it? But anyway, that's a different lesson. But think about it, this majestic building, they're impressed by it, and Jesus just told them that it's going to be torn down. You got to think so here they come to him in verse 3. Peter, James, John, and Andrew, no doubt they've been thinking, really, is this going to happen? Let's get more information. Let's go back to Jesus and ask him. And that's what they do here in verse 3. It says they ask him privately in verse 4, tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign when these things shall be fulfilled. So I think they've been pondering this and been thinking about what he just said earlier, and they're like, well, let's go ask him. We want to know more about this destruction of the temple. They want to know, when will this happen? I am glad, and you should be glad, that the disciples asked a lot of questions. But they're documented, and the answers are documented for us. Don't we have questions too? Yeah, I'm kind of glad that these guys were inquisitive like they were, and because we too, as mortals, we have questions, about these certain matters, and so did they. And they ask him. So I think it's neat that they did ask those questions. We can learn from them. And Jesus' answers definitely speaks to us today as far as when and what shall be the sign and all these. When will these be fulfilled? Now Jesus will use the entire rest of this chapter and all the next chapter answering these two questions. Okay, there's a lot here, and we only look at certain parts of it. But let's look at verse 5 and 6. And Jesus answering and began to say, "Take heed lest any man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." So Jesus is replying to those questions. He still keeps them in the dark. If you notice, he doesn't say specifically when these things will occur. The Father only knows that, right? And the Father has that in his own power. It's not for them to know. But see, Jesus does give them some caution and tells them about some events that will happen leading up to the climax. Remember the title of our lesson, The Climax of History. And the warnings that Jesus will give them, are they warnings to us too? Has there been false, let's look at Jesus' answer. Are there deceivers out there? Deception is one of the devil's best tools, isn't it? I mean, he's got a lot of tools in his toolbox, but the deception, the deceivers, it's his key one, isn't it? For sure. Has there been some saying that they were Christ? Yeah, we can go, even in our short history, that I can remember, the Jim Jones thing, okay? Yeah, Koresh. Remember the Heaven's Gate? I don't know how people died in that one, but this guy knew when the Lord was coming back, and they were going to, here, take this pill, and you'll be, yeah. So they're out there. It's happened, hasn't it? The deceivers are out there. He warns us against deceivers, and they're out there today, deceiving others. Sure, and I've been learning and studying this. I always learn new things, and I share them. I learned something new here that was pretty interesting. We talk about imposters, okay? John writes about it. As right after Jesus' crucifixion, they started popping up. 1 John, not in our text, but it fits this. It just shows how quick these things play out that Jesus talks about, to the disciples here. John wrote about it in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. He said, "Little children, it is the last time," meaning the last days, okay? Because Jesus said this. In the last days this would happen. Well, as in the early church, John writes about it. "As ye have heard that the Antichrist shall come, even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know this is the last time." So it was already happening while John was still writing, okay, while John was still ministering. False prophets were popping up then. Antichrist, he called them, claiming to be. Thought that was interesting. They were deceivers. At that early, the deceivers were showing their faces. The devil was at work that early. Anybody got a thought so far? I'm up here rambling.
I can tell you from experience, and I might be off with this, but we're talking about false prophets, and I believe greed is a big deal. And I can remember when I first started transitioning, and I guess believing, expressing my belief, Joel Osteen was one of the ones that I listened to. And what I have to say about that is, I'm glad I know the truth now, because there's a lot more to it than just feeling good, and I think he's a feel-good preacher. And there's just a lot more to it than that. You have ups and downs, and that's just part of being a Christian.
Yeah.
It's a matter of how you handle it and stuff. Then you use your situation or your experience to help someone else. I think that's real important. It's difference in monetary gain.
Yeah.
Me and somebody was just talking about this a couple days ago about how people use the cross to gain.
Yeah.
And that's not how it's supposed to be.
No. Verse 7, he continues on, and when ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, be ye not troubled, for such things must needs be, but the end shall not be yet. So, like the false Christ, wars also do not suggest the end of time. It's just going to be typical of the church age, is what he's saying here. Okay? Because of man's lust, wars have been going on throughout our history, haven't they? All over the world. Continually around the world, throughout history. I think this verse, he says it in his own words, don't be troubled by it. It needs be, but the end shall not be yet. So when I thought about, these are the things that he's telling his disciples. Remember originally they asked, when will this occur? When will these things happen? He's letting them know some things that's going to happen before the end. That's what he's saying. He doesn't say when, but be ready for all of this to be part of. And it is. Isn't all these things happening now? They have been happening. I'm not down through the whole entire list yet. As a matter of fact, our text skips some of them. So, and we're going to see this. So deceivers, we've looked at that. We know they've been around. They're abundant. Wars, they're happening all over the world. Verse 8 that we skip mentions famine and earthquake. Haven't we not seen that on a world stage? We have, haven't we? It's happening. These will be typical. These things will be typical of this entire age before he makes his return. Folks, we've witnessed all of them, haven't we? Not necessarily at the end of the age, but they happen during the age, and we've seen them all. Verse 9, but take heed to yourselves, for they shall deliver you up to councils, and in the synagogues ye shall be beaten, and ye shall be brought before rulers, kings, for my sake, for a testimony against them. Now he's speaking to the disciples, but then again, just like these other things that's played out in our life, this one could play out in our life as well, right? We could be persecuted one day. He's warning the disciples that it's going to happen to them. He told them, be prepared for persecution that would come against them before the end. So, like these other items mentioned previously, it's to be expected in this church age before his coming. It's to be. If he says it, it's going to happen, right? We're going to see that. Just like that earlier prophecy of the destruction of the temple. He said it, and it happened, didn't it? Are you going to doubt the rest of it? No, better not. Skip verse 13, and I got to read it. real quick. We're talking about things that are going to happen in the church age prior to his coming, okay? And I thought verse 13 is so fitting for what we have happening in the world right now. Remember, he's talking to the disciples, and they are Jewish people, right? And ye shall be hated of all men. Have they been hated? Have the Jews been hated on? For my name's sake. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So when I thought about to skip verse 13, I thought it's so fitting. What we're seeing playing out by Hamas on our own soil, at our college campuses, it's actually influencing some of our government's decisions. We're seeing it happen, are we not? Again, this is another prophecy playing out right before our eyes. You agree? See how it's all coming together, right? It's to be expected, and here it is. He said it, and we're seeing it happen. I mean, we could go back to, there's other history, obviously, with Hitler and so forth, but the Jews are still being hated on. Now, verse 14, I had to do a little extra work on it. Anybody got anything to add, by the way? We're talking about the church age before his second coming, things that we have to expect here. And he's warning the disciples and us.
He was talking about deceivers.
Mm-hmm.
The old timers used to call, I think old timers used to call deception witchcraft.
It is, yeah. So, but when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, the prophet, we're in verse 14 now, standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand, then let them that be in Judea flee to the mountains. So what is he talking about? Abomination of desolation. Spoken by Daniel. What does this mean? There's been some speculation about this, but Jesus makes some of it clear when he says Daniel's already spoke about it. Daniel mentions this in 3 places, chapter 9, chapter 11, chapter 12. Daniel prophesied that a prince would come into Jerusalem, destroy Jerusalem, said he would profane the temple, burnt offerings be taken away, said that he would set up an abomination within the temple. Who is this? What was Daniel talking about? Who is this person? As is the case with some prophecies, there's a short-term prophecy and a long-term prophecy. And I hope I'm not confusing you. I'm going to try to explain this the best way I can. In the short term, Daniel's prophecy was fulfilled by a king called Antiochus Epiphanes. He ruled Palestine from 175 to 164 BC. This is during the era between the Old and New Testaments, okay? This king from another country comes in, and he does exactly that. He overrun the city. His forces went into the temple. They set up an altar to Zeus, a false god, offered pigs. You know, remember how unholy a pig was, right? The Jewish. This guy was so evil. He took pigs into the sanctuary and made sacrifices. So this is that abomination of desolation that Daniel talked about back in the Old Testament. It played out at this period. So he desecrates the temple, kills all kinds of people, overruns the city. But when Jesus speaks of it, he speaks of it as a future event. So in other words, something similar is going to happen again. You had the first prophecy fulfilled with Epiphanes I just talked about. Well, guess what? The temple is going to be desecrated again, and that's what Jesus meant. You're going to see this happen again, this abomination of desolation. And when Jesus is talking, we're going back to the temple. Matthew's gospel says, I say unto you that this generation will not pass until all this takes place. So, typically in Scripture, a generation is 40 years. So the people that Jesus is talking to, granted what I just talked about happened prior in history, and Jesus is saying, look, it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen within a generation. So 40 years is a generation. And sure enough, 40 years later, after Jesus spoke it, it happened. So this Antiochus Epiphanes was the short term, the first fulfillment. Who was the long-term fulfillment? Who was it to come in and destroyed the temple in the generation that the disciples were a part of? It was Rome. 70 AD, this time, Roman commander Titus. I know this is getting boring history here for you, but there's a lot going on here. I'm trying to put it all together. In 70 AD, this time from the Romans, Commander Titus, there was mass murder of the people. The desecration of the temple at this time was they brought images of their emperor and set them up in and around the temple. That was an abomination. That was the second abomination. It was called abomination of desolation. The idolatry that they brought in was an abomination. And it brought desolation to 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, were killed. The city and the temple were destroyed. And Jesus gives this warning to his disciples about this horrible event because he's letting them know it's going to happen. You've got to be ready. Be ready. And that's another watch word we're going to talk about here in a minute, about being ready, because we need to be ready. These things that he tells them about, these things he tells us about, we got to be ready, right? We got to be ready for them. Well, Jesus is sharing this with his disciples. He's like, guys, this is going to happen within this generation. Be ready. You be ready. Tell your children to be ready. Tell everybody, be ready. Because when you see that this Roman force coming in, flee to the mountains. Because when they come in, it's going to be horrible. And it's exactly it was. So he gives them a warning about this. Prepare them for what's coming. Anybody got anything to add so far? Our text takes a big jump in material and verses. We go to verse 24. We've skipped some things dealing with the tribulation period. That's not in this lesson per se. But 24 and 25. But in those days after the tribulation, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. Verse 25, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. Remember, it's all started with a question, two questions. He's finally getting around to answering the one concerning his second coming. Here he touches on his second coming. This is an answer to their second question concerning his return. After this tribulation period, action starts. This is called, remember going back to our title, The Climax of History. This is big. How big is this event? All of the cosmos has changed because of this. Not just our world, okay? But the verse tells us that there's going to be changes that starts in the heavens when right prior to the Lord's coming, or part of the Lord's coming. The sun, moon, the stars, constellations that we look up at night and we're so used to seeing, it's all going to be different. It's all going to be changed, is what it says here. All that will be changed. So this is big, right? This is a big event. So big that our universe is going to take part in it, right? It's going to be changed. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. So, a lot different from his first coming, isn't it? Remember how humble his first coming was, how meek and lowly he was the first coming? The manger, and living the poor life of a son of a carpenter, and just meek and lowly as he was. It's not that way now, is it? He's coming with glory. He's coming with power, is what it says. The return. 27, and then shall he send his angels and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost part of the earth, the uttermost part of heaven. So, the King of Kings, he commissions his angels to gather his elect to all corners of the earth, he says. I think he's gathering those, and I don't want to get into the tribulation, amillennial and all that. I think that he's gathering, I think we're already going to be gone. And I think he's going back and gathering those that turn to him during the tribulation. Some believe otherwise. That's not what my lesson's about. My lesson's about his coming. Right? No matter what your stance is on the tribulation period and some of the things about his coming, there's no point in arguing it, but be in agreement that he is coming and be ready, right? No matter what your stance is, that we can all agree on, right? He is coming, and we need to know that. Last couple verses. But of that day and of the hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Take ye heed, watch, pray, for ye know not what the time is. These last two verses touch on the concept I just said. Be ready, okay? It says that the day, the hour, no one knows. We got to take heed, don't we? Don't we? We have to, because we face the danger of being unprepared, don't we? If we're not ready. Why else would he say that? Take heed. Be prepared. And the question came up in my study and my things I was reading. How did Jesus not know? Well, Jesus is God. Fair question. I think Jesus was speaking with his human conscience at this point, And he simply meant, as a man, he only knew what the Father revealed to him. I think the significance here regarding all this in this verse is no man will be able to determine when that time is. Any claim of such knowledge is a claim of a false prophet, isn't it? Right? Because no one knows that. So if anyone says they do, they are false. It's not biblical. It's not what Jesus said. Jesus said no man knows. So, when you hear some of these false teachers and they raise that point, well, he's coming back here, and they kind of go into that spiel. That's a false prophet, people. Don't listen to it. Turn the channel, right? He says, take heed and watch. Anyone who watches is not taken by surprise, are they? Anyone who watches is not taken by surprise. That's something we could probably take away from this. People were not ready because they failed to watch. Be watchful. That's what he says. Anybody got anything?
Pretty good statement. A lot of the things that are going on now is about talked about, so why are we surprised?
Yeah, exactly.
If we were watching,
A couple takeaways from this lesson I have here, and I want to touch on them when we'll be done. because I kind of spent too much time on history, but I thought it was important to kind of explain a particular verse that we looked at. When we read about fulfilled prophecy, that history can prove, it's already played out. Shouldn't this increase our faith? Shouldn't this increase our confidence? Shouldn't this warn us that the rest is going to happen? Everything that's been spoken, if we can prove, and we can, the many fulfilled prophecies, people, we need to believe the rest as well. Okay? Think on that. Those ones that are still out there that are yet to come, they are going to happen. That's what we need to be mindful of. They surely will occur. And this text also reminds us of God's divine judgment. You know, this study started out with the disciples seemed to be impressed by these stones, and Jesus told them that one day these stones would be taken down. Not one left on top of another. And sure enough, 40 years later, God's judgment played out in Jerusalem. They rejected his son, and they paid the price. And just as Jesus predicted or said, it did happen. Estimated 1 million dead, 97,000 captive. It happened. So get ready. There's more to happen, right? Yeah. And also the last verse, a couple of verses reminds us the watchwords for the church should be the words "be ready," right? Be ready. Do we get too occupied with living here? I'm afraid we do. I do. And can some of the things that we live for here take our eye off what we should be watching for?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you see this, he's mighty, he's powerful, and he will fulfill the rest of that prophecy. So are we watching? Anybody got anything to add?
When you was talking about him, I was sitting there thinking of something Jesus said, tear this temple down, I'll rebuild it in 3 days, and he spoke his body, and I just sitting there thinking about Easter, you know, he rose on the third day from the grave. Yeah. Sitting there thinking of Easter. That was something I promised.
Tim, in this day and age, if a person goes to Europe and sees what's left over part where they used to live compared to this country,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to leave this country and go.
Right.
I've been in Athens, Greece, and seen part of the old temples, what you're talking about. The big white column-round columns still standing.
Yeah.
And you wonder, how in the world did they ever get those erected as tall as they are?
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are laying down broke.
Yeah.
And there's still some of them standing. That's
Yeah.
in Athens, right
Yeah.
there. On the coast.
Yeah. A lot of determination and manpower.
I was real young when I saw that, but I ain't never forgotten.
Right.
I mean, I was only like 21, 22 years old. That was back in the 70s.
All right. Thank you all for your time.